EAGLES, Eagles.
Well, good morning, everybody. We've made it to Friday, but it is a stunner of a day on Birds 365. I'm Mike Gill. That's John McMullen, who has 2 hours of sleep, which is just a couple more hours than I got. With the Eagles keeping us up late and doing something I don't know that any of us envisioned. We've got that today. Plus, they also signed their own. A.J. Brown gets a monster deal. We'll get into that. Paul Domowitch, the great writer, will join us in the 8 o'clock hour. Chris Franklin, NJ.com, New Jersey Advanced Media, who covers the Eagles, will be here in hour number 2. So everyone's up late last night. Everyone has been waiting and wondering. And Roseman, who probably, John, wants to make a deal, is starting to say, I might not have to make a deal. And two, it got to the point where the two guys they would have traded up to get, they then had to decide between. I don't know that anybody had that on the bingo card for Birds 365 on Friday morning.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I wouldn't consider going into round one was them staying at 22. I said, well, they might go up and they might go down, but I doubt seriously they're going to pick a 22. And boy, everything broke their way. It really
So where
did.
was the moment, John, in the draft where it started to break so much for them? Where the trade, was there any moment where you felt they're not going to trade up because they don't have to? Was there that moment that kind of like started to materialize?
Well, 14 for 14 offensive players to start, which is a record. And not only is it a record, the previous record, Mike, was 7. So, I mean, they shattered 14 consecutive offensive players to start the draft. The previous record was 7. That's how offensive heavy this draft turned out to be. And you started to go, well, if they want defense, boy, they're looking pretty darn good. Now, there was still the assumption that there were some offensive linemen that could still be in the mix. But, when we started to think it was cornerback and Quinyon Mitchell or Terrion Arnold, well, then it was a very good situation. And then Howie spoke after and said that exact thing. Once you get to 15, which was the first defensive player off the board, which is Leotow Latu to Indianapolis, Howie said, they basically you start looking at it. You got 7 players you're comfortable with and how many spots, and you're like, whoa, this is breaking our way. And then you start to think, he mentioned you always have a preference. So do you want to move up and a little and try to make sure you get your preference? And they played good game of poker, and they were able to get Quinyon Mitchell at number 22. And he ended up, I mean, that was the first, people thought he would be the first corner off the board. He was the first corner off the board. It was just a lot later than we all thought. And for the Eagles to get him at that spot, there's not much to dislike about that pick and how it shook out for the Eagles.
No, and Troy Fatanu, the tackle, was the pick right before Philly. So there was the thought of maybe, is that the guy they wanted? That's right where they maybe would have moved up one spot, going back to the conversations we had this week with Les Bowen and Martin Frank, who told us, hey, they weren't going to let somebody jump ahead of them. Well, Pittsburgh, you knew, was looking at offensive line. They get Fatano right before you. So it's pretty clear, I guess, that this is the position and this is the guy that they wanted, because they had to make the choice, John, between Mitchell from Toledo and Terrion Arnold from the SEC Power, Alabama. And they go with Mitchell in this spot here. So let's kind of get your thoughts on why Mitchell over Arnold. You got the choice. You didn't have to trade or get the second guy. You got to pick which one you wanted. This was a wild moment in watching this. Is, wow, which way are they going to go? I had people, tweeting at me or posting at me, whatever the heck you want to call it, where are they going to go? And I said, I don't know, man. people forget Sirianni's best friend is the head coach at Toledo. So I'm sure there was a
Yeah.
lot of conversation and politicking for his guy there. You got the Alabama connection. They've gone to the SEC a lot. Was there a moment in your head of what are they going to do here?
Well, once, as you mentioned, Fautano, because I think he was still in the mix in Pittsburgh and he comes off the board. Then, I had veered back towards Mitchell and took him in my last mock draft. And I started with him and I ended with him.
At 22?
No, I did
Okay.
going up. So I got the player. I didn't get the spot.
You get points for that? Is there like a
Well, Zach Berman told me to take it, so I took it, and Roman Reigns acknowledged me. Third consecutive year I've gotten a player, more than one player. Cam Jurgens I got in the second round. Jordan Davis, Nolan Smith. Yeah, it's been a good run. So I put the Roman Reigns acknowledge me chance. You don't always get the spot right because things happen. And look, I didn't think there's any way it would have been there at 22. So that's a big part of it as well. But when it came down to Mitchell versus Arnold, yeah, you're right. I mean, Nick's old college roommate is the head coach at Toledo, and Larry Karras's son, his mentor, is the defensive coordinator. So, I mean, he had a probably a better framework of what this player is and has the potential to be than anybody else, because he trusts those guys so implicitly. And that certainly probably veered the Eagles in that direction. Howie did mention, Power 5 versus MAC, you worry a little bit about level of competition. But when you stand out like he stood out on the film, that helps that go away a little bit. And yeah, they just the other part was I had focused on Mitchell on Arnold late in the process, and I said, well, who's the better fit for Vic Fangio? And everybody I talked to, it's only three. There's three guys said Arnold. But and then I talked to a former GM, and he explained a pretty good point to me in that yeah, they didn't say he was all a better player. They said he was a better fit for the scheme. And the ex GM said, "Look, man, this league moves quickly. Um, you might not even be playing this scheme next year if things
Yeah.
don't go well for Nick Sirianni and you bring in a new coach. He's going to probably want to bring in a new defensive coordinator, and he might be playing an entirely different scheme. So I wouldn't get caught up on picking for scheme immediately if you have a better player, and I think that's the way the Eagles um, uh, landed and defaulted to. And I think he's got a higher ceiling, and that's the way they went. And that comfort factor, which you mentioned, with the coaches at Toledo, I think that played a big factor into it as well.
So Arnold is the first corner off the board. The Eagles get the guy they want because they had the choice. It wasn't like, hey, maybe they wanted Terry Arnold. Nope, they had the opportunity to take him. They did not take him. They end up with Quinyon Mitchell. So, John, life moves fast, and he's here now. Now what for Arnold? You got two corners here. You said earlier this week, if you draft a corner, that James Bradbury could be a post-June 1st. Do they plug and play Quinyon Mitchell right off the bat? Does he have to come in? Do they want? Is he the kind of player playing at Toledo, Mac school, that they would rather give the Lido Shepherd, Sheldon Brown treatment and hang out on the sidelines for a little while? How do you see year one for Quinyon Mitchell?
I mean, I think the hope is to get him out there and turn him into a starting cornerback very early, whether that's week one or early in the season. Look, even when you bring up guys like Lido and Sheldon, it's such a different era now. It's such a sense of urgency to get these picks on the field. That's why I have real concerns over all the quarterbacks drafted early. I mean, you got to get those guys on the field early And I think the vast majority aren't ready to be on the field early. And I think you're going to see coaches fired, GMs fired, in the whole 9 yards. Now, that's a little bit of a different position, but corner's really difficult. I've been talking about it in the lead up to the draft a lot, especially in this particular scheme, which is really complicated.
The hit rate
Really,
for corners in the NFL is 34% from the chart we were looking at the other day. 34% make it
to a
generally, and
second contract. Yeah.
to the second contract, that means the other 70+% not making it. So you're taking a guy that you're almost expecting to fail here.
Well, that's not how the Eagles look at it, obviously.
No, I'm saying as a fan, you're saying you just took a guy who there's a good chance he does not make it.
Yeah, I mean, if you play the odds, I said take the offensive lineman. He's getting the second contract.
Yep.
But if that's but I do think the league is changing from that perspective as well, and it's not about 10 years anymore. You want a corner for 10 years. No, you don't. You want somebody who can be effective on that rookie deal. And even if you have to move on, this year, I think the best example of that would be at linebacker, Patrick Queen. He's in Pittsburgh now. So he didn't get a second deal in Baltimore, but guess what? He played really well at the end of his rookie contract. And they made a run and they didn't get to where they wanted to go. But ultimately, I consider that a successful draft pick for the Baltimore Ravens, even though he doesn't get that second contract because they didn't want to pay him at that position, what they were going to have to pay him. And all that complicates. It doesn't necessarily mean if you don't get a second contract, you're not a good player or a competent player. But I think the whole mentality is shifted down to it's not about 10 years. It's about 3
so on
years
this premise, is A.J. Brown considered a bust because he didn't get a second contract?
Well, yeah. And in Paul Hembo's chart that you're talking about, yes, in that instance, he didn't get a second deal with Tennessee. So technically he's not a hit. Again, there's a lot of context to that. He's obviously a hit as a player in the NFL. Had troubles with Tennessee from a contract standpoint. They didn't want to go as high. Imagine that. It was 25 million. Now he's up to 33 million or whatever starting in 2027. And that made it more of a good day for the Philadelphia Eagles getting that extension done. So
yeah, I want to get a little deeper into that extension in a little bit, but I do want to continue to kind of put the pieces of this Quinyon Mitchell pick together. Were you finishing up?
Yeah, I mean, I just think the league's changed in the fact that it's more condensed, and if they get 3-4 years out of them, that still could be a good pick. If you want to pay him, that's always a good thing. But there's certain positions where you'll hand ring, and corner's probably not one of them, to be honest. You see Slay at 33 still playing at a high level. By no means can he not get a second contract, but I think the league is now boiled down to more of a college mindset where you're constantly turning it over. 4 years in college, it's even less now, but except at certain positions, and quarterback obviously being one of them, offensive line being one of them, and the rest, there's constant turnover in the league at every other position, basically.
Yeah. So obviously people questions Mac, who did he play against? What are some of the things that the Eagles fans who have questions are going to like about this player, even with the smaller school competition that he generally faced for the most part?
Well, he's a pure outside
This is a
corner.
guy who Nick Saban said last night, if you were watching the ABC broadcast, he said he tried to get him to go to the portal to get him to go to Alabama.
Yeah.
He would not leave Toledo, but Alabama wanted him. So Alabama thought he was good enough to go to their school. Now, that doesn't mean he was good enough once he got there to get on the field, but Alabama wanted him to hit the portal so they could try to get him.
Yeah, and that was a big story with him because he was very loyal to Jason Candle, who's the head coach at Toledo. who's Nick Sirianni's, one of Nick's best friends and was his college roommate. And they played receiver together at Mount Union. They coached together at Mount Union. They've been together a long time and been friends for a long time. And when you look at especially guys who are at programs like Jason Candle in Toledo, if you think about it from that perspective, Mike, if he's got a guy who's going to be a potential first round pick in the NFL, he's going to talk that guy up because he wants him to be successful in the NFL, and then you can recruit off of that. Look what we did for insert name. That's how college works. And that's where I think the Eagles had an advantage because, all the other teams, when it came to Quinyon Mitchell, are getting the smoke blown up there, and the Eagles are getting the real deal because he's so close to Candle and Nick's so close to Candle and Vince Karras. So I do think that was an advantage, and they probably know this player better than anybody else because of that advantage. And they felt very comfortable with it. And you mentioned that's sort of those things like that's good context, Mike, that you bring up what Nick said and that they wanted him to come to Alabama because that's like we talk about, well, he's the first cornerback drafted since Lito Shepherd in the first round. The Eagles finally drafted a corner and they never draft corners. Yeah. But I talk about it all the time, but they wanted to draft J.C. Horn. They wanted to draft Patrick Surtain. They wanted to draft Derek Stingley Jr. They wanted to draft Sauce Gardner. They weren't in a position to draft him because there's 31 other teams, sometimes making goopy decisions.
That was a big theme last night. That's the first time since 2002 that they had taken a secondary player. And they did it last night, and it was unconventional. It dropped to exactly the spot they were in at the start of the night. Many people prognosticated that they would either have to move up to grab this particular player or the other one that they had to choose between. They also made the huge signing before. We'll kind of take a little deeper look at the A.J. Brown deal as well because, man, now you've got Brown and Smith, and most people say, look, you can't keep all of these guys. You got to have to make a decision. When they chose Smith, some people speculated about Brown. Well, Brown is back. So you have the core of that offense all intact, and now you have a young player on defense to start building with as well. Let's take a deeper look at that coming up next with the great Paul Domowitch, who will join us right here on Birds 365.
Field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on three. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Heading down the shore. Have a ball once more.
Here, imaginations run wild and time stands still. Because here, you can find the best of the Jersey Shore, all on one 5-mile island. So leave the old you behind and get lost in the woods.
Wild, wild, wildwood days.
Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Hi, I'm Jim Muehlbronner, Managing Partner at Del Val Insurance Group. Give us a call. We're a local, knowledgeable agency, not an 800 number. Go Birds!
the greatest fans on earth. It's a bold statement, but would you expect anything less from Philadelphia? 58 years of heartache creates a toughness, a grit, a resolve not found in most. Sure, our prayers were answered, but now that we've had a taste, we're looking for more. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles.
EAGLES, Eagles.
A good Friday morning, everybody. It's a Friday morning that if you went to sleep early, you probably are a little surprised at how it all shook out for the Eagles. Many people prognosticated maybe this player, but maybe not in this spot. How did it all happen? It was a record night of offensive players. Paul Domowitch, we saw, 14 straight go off the board before a defensive player finally went. And I guess at that moment, Howie Roseman said, I don't need my phone tonight. I'll just sit right where I'm at. And they get the guy they probably would have been very comfortable moving up to get. How big of a surprise is it that we're talking about this player at pick 22?
Well, I mean, they were, like Howie said last night, I mean, things fell for them. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. When you're picking that far down, you're at the mercy of the teams in front of you. 14 offensive players right out of the gate. The run on quarterbacks, those things kind of helped set the table for them. And then their choice became which cornerback to take. I mean, they had the two top cornerbacks right fall into their lap, and they went with Mitchell.
14 consecutive offensive players to start, Dombo. The previous record was 7, and it jumps to 14. I mean, that's unbelievable. We're sitting there in the Eagles media house, and it's just offense. 6 quarterbacks in the top 12. There's going to be a lot of GMs unemployed in a couple of years, I think, when it comes to that. And the craziest pick of all, the Atlanta pick with Michael Penix at number 8 after paying Kirk Cousins $100 million. And now they picked a quarterback number 8. What the heck are they doing? Everything broke for the Philadelphia Eagles. There are some crazy thought processes in NFL buildings these days, Damo. You've been around a long time. Do you agree with that or disagree?
Wasn't that the Atlanta doing, guys? The Green Bay draft a quarterback when you have one?
Yeah, I mean, just look at Atlanta. I mean, like you had mentioned, not only picking a quarterback, I mean, Terry Fontenot has put his career on the line here with that move. And the fact that they passed on a Hall of Fame quarterback when they passed on Bill Belichick for Dan Quinn or for
Raheem Morris. Yeah.
Raheem Morris. So, it's all about offense in this league. You got to, score points. You need a quarterback. That basically, teams are willing to reach. But the bottom line is, those 6 quarterbacks that went in the top 12, probably maybe 3 of them are going to make it. Maybe.
I would say maybe.
So,
and by the way, Caleb Williams, a tremendous prospect, and I think he would be number 1 overall in most years. He's going to a situation that they never develop quarterbacks. So I wouldn't even put a check mark in his column.
Yeah.
Never mind the Bo Nixes of the world, who, by the way, I think is the 3rd oldest quarterback in the NFL coming in. But back to the Eagles, Damo. If you see the one guy, and Howie kind of talked about this after the draft, that you have a preference, even though they had a bunch of guys and they felt very comfortable when they got to 15. And they said, we got a bunch of guys on the board that we're going to get one of them that we're comfortable with at 22. But he did say you always have a preference. Troy Fatanu went number 20 to Pittsburgh. He was the one guy who I said, maybe they'll go up a little bit early. And maybe other than Mitchell. And they did neither. And they ended up with Mitchell. And they're going to say that was their first choice. Which would have been your first choice between Troy Patano and Quinyon Mitchell?
Well, throw in the other corner too.
Terrion Arnold. Yeah. Or if you like Terrion Arnold. Yeah.
Mitchell. I mean, I probably Mitchell. I don't have they clearly on their board when they got to 15. I mean, it sounds like Mitchell was their top rated player still on the board. So it wasn't a hard choice for them. It's an interesting contrast with the corners because, they went MAC over SEC.
Power five football.
They went off coverage guy over a press corner. I hope this isn't a Jalen Reagor, Justin Jefferson decision, but it's interesting. It's an interesting decision they made. I think Mitchell's going to turn out to be a good player. I preferred Arnold going in only because of the versatility he gives them. You can play him anywhere on the back end. This guy, they made it clear that he's going to play outside corner. I'm not saying he can't play inside, but
yeah, now I knew it coming into the draft. I didn't put a lot of stock into it, but after they made the pick, I put more stock into it, and that's the fact that Nick Sirianni, one of his best friends, is the Toledo coach, and Larry Karras's kid is the defensive coordinator. And and I was telling Mike Damo, when you got a big time prospect at Toledo, you want to sell that kid as a normal college coach because you want to recruit off him and say, look what we did for this. And everybody around the league is getting that sort of view of Quinyon Mitchell. And Nick knows everything. They're telling him the truth. The good, the bad, the indifferent, and I think it was all good. I think that was a big part of this. Agree or disagree?
Agree. You just hope that the relationship wasn't too close and played a part in the decision more so than what they saw on film. It kind of scares me that they didn't know he could play press until they saw him at the Senior Bowl. Because he never, he didn't play it at Toledo.
Yeah, but he played in like a weird defense where they gave him one side of the field, but it wasn't press. It was like he was allowed to roam a little bit. So I don't know how that's going to translate, but it wasn't. He did, lock down at a lower level, granted, but lock down one side of the field. So
if Mitchell, excuse me. If Mitchell doesn't make it, it's one more reason they can fire Nick Sirianni, right? Because he obviously had input into this.
I didn't think of that. Yeah,
that's he's probably pretty tied to that pick. What does this, Damo, in your mind, mean for James Bradberry? Is this a definitive move here that Mitchell's got to get on the field and play right away? Or do you say, hey, we got our two veterans, sit and learn from these guys for the year?
I think it means hasta la vista, baby.
Yeah,
I don't think Bradbury's going to be on their roster when training camp opens.
I agree. He might not be on the roster by the end of Sunday. Do you think they can get like a 7th round pick? Maybe. Do you think they could get something for James Bradberry?
Well, there's probably some team out there that didn't watch the tape from last year, so we'll see.
Wow. So that would be a situation where would say post June 1st they would mark him and he would be basically released, or they would try to move him over the next 2 days of the draft here. But sounds like you guys agree that he's going to be gone, because John, you mentioned this earlier in the week that you think he's going to be also released.
Yeah, I thought if they took and I was one of the few people, and Damo knows this and he disagrees. I was one of the few people that thought I was kind of interested to see him with Vic Fangio, because I think he's a pure zone corner, and I think Vic would have used him correctly. And I thought there was an opportunity for him to have a bounce back year, but now he's never going to get that opportunity if they took a corner in the first round, and that's what they did. And yeah, good guy, but probably the end of the road in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
Yeah, big time. He had a great year the year before. Last year, there was a lot of, it just seemed that he was never really they moved him to slot corner for a couple of weeks due to some injury. He had an injury
that was
himself.
a big mistake, by the way, moving the slot corner. I mean, that's a big, long guy who that made no sense to me whatsoever.
Well, and I think maybe that incorporates why you think he could possibly bounce back is, hey, I need a fresh start from that coordinator and what they were trying to do with me, get me back to where I was more comfortable. And maybe he has a year like John Gannon got out of him. But as you said, it looks like we'll never see that.
Yeah, Bradbury wasn't a slot all that long. I mean, a veteran should be able to bounce back from being put in an awkward position once he gets back outside, and that didn't happen. I mean, right to the end, he was struggling. So,
and by the way, one of the problems with a trade, if they trade him pre-June 1st, they take a pretty significant cap hit, almost $10 million. Whereas if they cut him with the post-June 1st designation, they lose no cap space. They have dead money, but they lose no cap space. So they might not even want that 7th round pick. They may just want to cut him.
Although A.J. Brown's new contract, I'm sure, lowers his cap number.
Oh, yeah.
Significantly this year. So that probably
they might be able to take it on, but is it really that valuable? Is a 7th round pick that valuable? No. I'd rather have the cap space.
Have the cap space, right?
Yeah.
How about that, Damo? Were you surprised to see right on the minutes before the draft that A.J. Brown? There's been a lot of speculation about him, especially after the Smith deal, what his future might look like, and then you've got all these other receivers now trying to get one. Amon-Ra St. Brown gets his, and here's A.J. Brown who just pops in and gets one. What about the timing of that deal?
I mean, I was a little bit surprised because I wasn't sure what his future was going to be here, particularly after the way this season went with the situations with him. But clearly, this is a team that is determined to make sure they have the best possible talent around their quarterback. And A.J. Brown is still, one of the top 5 receivers in the league, along with Smith. I mean, so, there are very few reasons right now for Jalen Hurts to fail. So we're going to get a pretty good idea.
Yeah. Or Kellen Moore. Or, everybody. Nick Sirianni. Everybody.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I've been saying it. AJ's the best pure football player on this team. And it was it was weird with WIP, and that it was weird the way it exploded, because it was just a goofy poll that somebody put on social media. It's probably an intern, and the Eagles couldn't trade him from a cap standpoint. And then it took off, and Kay Adams ran with it and said, what, and asked him on her show. And AJ, throughout the whole process, was pretty much like, no, I don't want to go anywhere. But AJ is kind of weird in that he tells the truth, and he was like, but it is a business. He would put that on the end, and people would run with that. I always tell AJ he doesn't want advice from me, but just get off social media, and I think he'd be fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, he loves it here. And I mean, the exploding cap helps as well, because you're going to have the new TV deal, and it keeps going up and up and up. And if you think about it, from 5 years ago or 10 years ago, you couldn't pay 2 wide receivers this money, but now you can. And it's a win-win from my perspective, and makes the day that much better for the Eagles, because he's their best player.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we've looked at, a couple of years ago, we looked and said, well, once they sign Jalen and he gets this big contract, they're going to have to start dumping bodies off the boat. Well, this league has figured out how to squeeze a dollar, every single dollar they can out of, they're playing in Brazil. I mean, so the whole global thing is going to explode. I mean, there's still much money to be made by this league, and that means this cap is going to continue to go up. Would it go up 30 million this year?
Yeah, crazy.
just
And
amazing.
by the way, Jeffrey Lurie is a big part of this, and I'm glad how we mentioned him, because other GMs, if you go to your owner as a GM, Damo, and you say, hey, I want to extend so-and-so 3 years before you have to extend so-and-so, they'll be like, get the hell out of my office. I'm not giving them money right now.
Right.
And Jeffrey's like, he's going to save money down the road, because we still have Chase coming. We still have Jefferson. He's not making that 33 million average until 2027.
Yeah,
you know how many receivers are going to pass that number?
I was going to ask, like, the timing of the deal for a guy like AJ, where, you know, Devontae was interesting because I guess he's not really a number one receiver on this particular team. So some people said, well, he signed this deal early, and now he's going to start looking around and say, man, I didn't get as much as so-and-so. But A.J. Brown is in a different category. To get him before those guys, that's a pretty big move, I think, by them.
Yeah.
The Smith one you look at and say, okay, that's pretty good.
My bigger
Brown
concern
is on a different level.
My bigger concern, guys, is when 27 rolls around, and if AJ's still playing at the level AJ plays at, he's going to say, oh, I'm underpaid. That's my bigger concern, is that might happen. But from an Eagles perspective, it's like, oof.
Well, Damo, you probably covered many of those instances in the Reed era of, whoa, well, I outperformed my deal. What's going on here? I mean, you saw that often with the Brian Westbrooks and, you know, many of those guys who signed those deals. Now, this one's a pretty big deal, but as John is saying, some of these guys are going to get theirs, and he's going to have this measly $33 million, and you know,
with $84 million guaranteed.
Yeah.
We'll see how it looks.
Joe Banner's the guy that kind of
Joe
pioneered the signing early.
Yeah,
but what he would do is he would get guys really before their careers exploded, and sign them while they still weren't sure whether they were, while the player wasn't even sure what his career held. And they'd get him at a below market price, and convince him that, hey, we're paying you now. You might be underpaid in a couple of years, but deal with it. That's different than what they're doing now, and that they're certainly paying. AJ Brown is not getting a below market deal here, at least right now. Like you said, John, in 2027, he may feel differently, but they've had a knack for Howie's had a knack for restructuring deals for a year or two with older guys. When it gets to that point, they've been willing to deal with some dead money down the road. That'll probably happen here. But like we were just talking about the cap, I don't think anybody's going to have to worry about dead money in the near future in the NFL.
And by the way, nobody knows Joe better than you. Joe cracks me up because, the way he acted as team president, he's getting all these deals, as you mentioned, and now he's on social media and he's like, this is so dumb. Why is Devontae Smith doing it? I love it. He's turned into the agent aspect of it, and he's like, you would have done the same thing, Joe. You would have been trying to do so it's hilarious when you change that.
Well, Joe has spent a lot of his post executive career as an advisor on both sides of the fence to teams. To teams in negotiations and to players in negotiations. I mean, he had a lot to do with Dak Prescott's deal. I think he secretly would like to be a full-time agent, except why should he? He's
exactly. He doesn't need those headaches. But I just find it's so interesting. He's like, he would have been trying to get that deal done with Devontae, and now he's like, why is he doing that deal?
I asked John earlier, Paul, was there a moment last night where this board starts to get to a point where you're like, oh my gosh, they're not going to have to move and they might get the choice? Was there that kind of moment in this draft, a number that starts happening, or a team that did something that you were kind of like, this is really going their way?
Yeah, I mean, you had those 14 offensive players go. So right then, that with them looking for edge rusher, offensive line, I mean, the offensive linemen went early, some, but there still were going to be plenty left. and then cornerback. But then right after that, you had the Colts take Latu, the kid from the edge rusher from UCLA, and Seattle took Murphy, the defensive tackle. So at that point, I was starting to wonder. You had a sense one of those two corners, either Mitchell or Arnold, were going to be still on the board. I didn't expect, right up until about 20, that both of them would be there. I mean, that's just, some days, it pays to be lucky.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is Belichick was on the McAfee show last week and was saying about how, hey, we're looking at this board and here's Vince Wilfork. You could go over every scenario in your mind and not get the one that ended up happening last night. I mean, was there any thought in your mind that Arnold and or Mitchell would both be there? Because it almost felt like a fait accompli that they were going to have to move up.
And Cooper DeJean was there as well. A lot of people speculated he might be the Eagles pick, and he's still there, by the way, on day 2.
Wow.
So they could have went. Kool-Aid McKinstry's there and still there.
Yeah.
That everybody was there.
Well, Howie said last night, it's not in his nature to sit tight.
Yeah.
I mean, the Eagles are not the Pittsburgh Steelers. I mean, I don't think the Steelers have made a trade in the first round since, before God created the earth.
You would think when Andy got there, they would have changed a little bit.
Did you think with the Eagles at 22 and them at 21 that there, was a chance that the Eagles could try to move up one to get the guy they wanted, or did they seem content with, we'll take whoever you don't take? Because if they wanted the offensive lineman, there had to be some thought that they might have to move that one spot.
Well,
they would have had to go over Pittsburgh for the offense.
Right, exactly.
If you look at the two teams in front of them, Pittsburgh and Miami, the Eagles have a good relationship with both. I mean, Pittsburgh's got their former VP of player personnel. Miami, they've traded, a number of, I mean, that's who they go to when they need to make a trade. So I think they knew what they were thinking before they actually made their picks. So they knew those guys, at least they knew Mitchell was going to still be on the board. If somebody threw him a curve and traded up, they felt pretty confident that Arnold would be there, if not Mitchell. So I that's part of being a good drafting team is knowing what's happening in front of you and knowing who wants to trade up, so that you're not totally it's been a long time since they've been completely blindsided in the first round of the draft by a team that did something that they didn't expect.
Probably got to go back to the Marcus Smith year, right?
Yeah.
When they had all the guys started.
And we've had a lot of examples this week of that draft blindsiding them a little bit. And, the evolution of them since then, Damo, a lot of people look at Howie's record as a drafter. Sometimes, obviously, a checkered past with certain players. Rieger obviously stands out, but you just kind of mentioned something that perked my ears up. That's the thing about being a good drafting team. Do you look at Philadelphia as a team that gets this night right generally?
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, it's been Howie's evolution as a personnel guy, as a drafter, in that he's established relationships around the league with people. And that's how you kind of figure out what's going on before you're drafting. And he's gotten good at that. I mean, like I said, he's very seldom surprised anymore by anything that's going to happen in front of him.
Yeah, it's almost like experience helps, Damo, and nobody, and nobody seems to understand that. And now we had the day 2
in all professions.
Yeah, it might even help in a certain profession that we know something about. You more than me, but I know something about it. It might even help there. But
it really separates Philadelphia from the others, is that they have the liberty of making mistakes, Howie and his crew. Other teams draft out of desperation for their job.
Yeah.
Yeah, as you saw with the quarterbacks. And,
he's all, what they've also done this year, and I mean, their free agency class, I've been very impressed with, in that I never thought they would get to the draft and have addressed this many needs, so that they were flexible going in. I mean, you know, you looked at them and you said they still need corner help, they still need edge rushing help, and they could use depth at offensive line. But I mean, that's 3 spots as opposed to what they were looking at.
Don't forget all-Paul linebacker. Did you mention that? I mean, that's the one spot.
I'm kind of confident that they've dealt with that in free agency, but
yeah. Well, they have. I didn't think they'd have 50 and 53 going into day 2, but they do. So now they have a chance to button up and get some at least meaningful competition early on in the process. There's still a ton of good offensive linemen out there. You think, Edgerrin Cooper's a guy who I think could be a day 1 starter at all-ball linebacker for this team. That's the guy I've kind of. Do you think they would package those 2 and go off the board? They did it with Saquon at running back in free agency. Let's finally get a linebacker, Paul Domowitch, on day 2 of the NFL draft. Or am I just insane? Probably.
I'm okay with their linebacker situation right now. Yeah. I mean, unless there's somebody, and I've looked at, you look at who's still available in the draft. I mean, I don't think there's anybody where you say, I want to, trade
Junior Colson
to move up to 34, 35 and get them. I think if they sit there, they'll be fine with, picking up edge rushing help, an offensive lineman. I'm still not convinced that they won't go get another corner. I mean,
Darius be a nickel. I'll say that.
Darius Slay's 33 years old. I mean, and he can't stay healthy.
He got in on the social media. He got in on the social media game last night. By the way,
Slay is phenomenal on social media. But I like Kaylee Ringo as a prospect. I like Eli Ricks as a prospect.
Yeah.
I think they have outside corner prospects. I still think they need some help in the slot. Avante is a good player, but he can't stay healthy.
You're not sold on Isaiah Rodgers?
And I think, I thought it was a nice lottery ticket for the Eagles. Honestly, Damo, he hasn't played in a year.
Yeah.
He showed some nice upside in Indianapolis as a part-time player, but he played outside there because they had Kenny Moore. And I'm like, if he has a bad summer, they could cut him. They signed him to 1 year, $1.055 million. I'm like, and people think they got Deion Sanders. I'm like, settle down. That's why they're drafting a corner in the first round. Now, he might be an ascending player. He might pick up where he left off, and he might turn out to be a very good player. But he's not even, to me, he's not guaranteed a 53-man roster spot. He's got to show up in August and play well, or he could be out of here that quickly.
Yeah. I mean, one of the reasons I thought they might go Arnold instead of Mitchell is because Arnold has more experience playing inside. Yeah. He's not as fast. I mean, I think he ran. I mean, he ran a 4.5 40 at the combine, which kind of turned a lot of people off, I believe. But he's more of he seems to fit the mold more of a Vic Fangio.
Yeah, well, that's what everybody told me. He fits the Fangio mold better.
So but that's why I was a little bit surprised they went Mitchell. But
I was telling Mike Damo, I was talking to an ex-GM, and he brought up a good point to me. He's like, he told me, don't get caught up in the scheme stuff because things move so quickly now. I mean, if Nick doesn't live up to expectations, he's out. If you bring in a new coach, Vic's out. Yeah. He's going to want his own defensive guy. You might be playing a different defense, so take the better player.
Yeah,
I can't imagine though. Is that how? That's not how Roseman's envisioning these moves. That hey, I'm making a move with the thought I'm going to fire this guy.
I don't. Not necessarily that, but I think he brings up a good. He does. I think Howie knows.
But the point is valid that you never know what's going to happen, and that look, they hired a defensive coordinator last year. They changed him in the middle of the damn season. Yeah. So I don't think that was on anybody's thought process. And now you're going to what's just the fourth guy for many of these current Eagles.
Yeah.
So that point is valid that this is the fourth different quarter. And like, that's the way the league is set up, guys, is everybody's looking for the next young, bright mind, only for them to get scooped up and get hired someplace else. Like, you don't have like the venerable Tom Moore calling plays on the sideline for 49 years for the Indianapolis. Like, those guys are out the window now. These guys are hired not to be fired, to be hired someplace else almost immediately.
Yeah. And that, so to the scheme talk, but you brought up edge rusher. There's a guy,
Although I guess
Marshawn.
Vic Fangio, by the way, I guess Vic Fangio would fall into the Tom Moore
He
calling
would.
plays
Yeah, he's
on
as
the
close
side.
as
I
it
think
is.
his head coaching days are probably over.
Look, and the Eagles might hire a head coach and say, hey, you got to keep Vic. You got to keep Vic and Stout. So,
Well,
I mean,
Vic's getting close to that. Well, not close to that age. He's at that age where you look around. The new thing in the NFL is senior advisor. You look at Dom Capers. Dom Capers is a senior defensive advisor, I think, in Detroit.
He moves around so much.
There's about 6 of them now. That's what you do when you get when you're a legendary coach, but they don't want to. You don't want to spend time 18 hours a day as a coordinator.
Well, Tom, way back they used to have like 9-man coaching staffs, and now we're going to get to the point where everybody's got a personal coach. We're getting to that. We're getting to that level, and you have all these layers and titles.
Yeah, I'm 47. At what age can I be a senior advisor? Because I want that
you're
job.
Close, Mike, you're getting close.
The Eagles have an assistant head coach, an associate head coach. I mean, it's not the type. There was a great episode of Cheers, the old great sitcom, where they didn't have the money to give anybody raises, so they gave them titles. I think that's the NFL, and they made everybody happy with titles. Senior defensive assistant.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, day 2 is here, and we kind of hinted at it. The Eagles have 2 picks, 50 and 53. A lot of interesting, players on the board, guys that were discussed at 22. Cooper DeJean, Kool-Aid McKinstry. If you like a linebacker, you could go down some roles here. Paul, Howie wants to make calls. So is today the day they do something crazy? Because last night was too unconventional for the Eagle fans. Just wake up and see they stayed at 22 and took a guy they wanted. That can't be the way the Eagles draft finishes. Now, can it be?
Well, I mean, John had mentioned earlier, the possibility of them, trading up, trading those 2 picks for, to move up. They don't have a third right now, although I guess they could get one in a trade up if they traded both of these 2nd-round picks. I don't know. I mean, I just think they may be happy staying where they are and and hoping lightning strikes twice in this draft, where the people they want fall to them. You had mentioned the kid from Western Michigan, John.
Marson Nealon.
They still need edge rushing help. I don't think they're going into this 2nd round saying we've got to get an edge rusher. But if one is, one that they rated highly is there with those picks, I think they'll take one.
And by the way,
start going from the SEC to the MAC. Is that what's happening in this
draft?
Right.
Possibly.
They're leaving Georgia and Alabama. They're going.
There's
to the
a lot.
Midwest.
There's still, by the way, at P Damo. Make sure you follow Paul on X. Does a tremendous job. 33rd team here with JAKIB Sports. Our Friday guy just worked out. Always works out to get you after the draft. Is phenomenal. But I still think there's a ton of good offensive linemen still on the board as well. You can get a guy like Cooper Beebe who could at least push Tyler Steen, I think, right away. That Jackson Powers Johnson, I don't know how much versatility he has, but he's a center, but I think he can play in the interior. He could help. You got that kid from BYU if you want lanes there, apparent. There's a ton of good offensive linemen. I would bet offensive line if the Eagles they're gonna get one if they keep both picks.
Yeah, one thing we don't know that they do.
Oh, Zach Frazier, Mike's a West Virginia guy. Sorry, Dama.
No, that's it. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of interior linemen that are going to be available. But the one thing they know that we don't is Hennessy. I mean, how confident are they that he's going to be fine and going to stay healthy? I mean, if he's healthy, Man,
he's a good player.
he gives them one of the, a really top interior lineman.
Yeah, he's a good player.
We don't know that. And I don't know how much, considering his history recently, they want to risk that. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's very possible they go with one of those interior linemen or somebody that they see as a potential down the road replacement for.
Or even a third wide receiver would be interesting to pay, 84 million guaranteed, whatever Devontae got, and then bring in another wide receiver and then put more pressure on Kellen Moore. That could be in the mix as well to get Tony Franklin, that kid from Oregon. He's out there.
Well, in the words of Micah Parsons, I can't believe how lucky the damn Eagles are. We'll see how lucky they get tonight. Yes, Micah Parsons last night again. Just perplexed at the Eagles' ability to just run circles around the Dallas organization. Maybe not on the field, but the front office, it seems that the Eagles win that battle. But you don't win in the front office all the time. You got to win games on the field. The next step tonight, the draft, and, of course, Paul Domowitch, 33rd team, and just an outstanding football mind, joined us here on this Friday edition of Birds 365. Great to see you, Damo.
Great to see you guys. Thanks for having me. Take care.
Thanks,
awesome
Damo.
Stuff as always. Been reading and following Damo. It seems like I told him, I remember those years where he was on that beat, following those Andy Reid teams, and that was the Hall of Fame voter, right?
Oh yeah. Yep. Damo covered Vic Fangio when he was with the Philadelphia Stars.
Wow.
Yeah.
Can we get a Philadelphia Stars back here?
Yeah, why not?
Another incarnation. Is this UFL going to make it? I mean, I'm not watching it yet. My buddy Anthony Becht is the coach.
Well, I think there's a role. I mean, now that they're down to one, I think it's good that they
had
down
to merge.
to one league. Yeah.
I like the concept of I just haven't. I always say I want to get into it, but I haven't this year. But I see the ratings have been decent.
I kind of bummed that they brought the Stars back from the perspective of they never actually played in Philadelphia. Number one.
Did they play the first year in Philly and then Baltimore?
No, I meant the new version when they brought them back.
Version. Yes.
Yeah. They were playing. It was pandemic. They were playing all in one site wherever it was. But
they're trying to. Well, this UFL they play in their own stadiums.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, they do.
Yeah. We'll have to get Anthony on the show.
But the original Philadelphia Baltimore Stars were sort of legendary. There are a lot of good players on those.
Well,
teams,
the original USFL was a legendary story that had legitimate Hall of Fame level talents on those teams. It wasn't a developmental league. It was a competitive.
That's what I mean. That was the Stars I remember. So I was like, I don't want to see a bunch of no names playing for the Philadelphia Stars.
Yeah, we'll if I'm filling in here in the short term next week or something, I'll try to get Anthony to come on. And he's done a lot of media. He used to love covering the draft. Anthony Becht. He used to do
he's the St. Louis coach, right? St. Louis.
He's the St. Louis coach. Yeah, he's the St. Louis. He loves it there too. He played for the Rams. Had a cup of coffee with the Rams. Him and Mark Bolger, who both went to West Virginia, were really close friends in college. So he ended up going to the Rams, I think, late in his career. So he ends up kind of getting that connection with St. Louis. But he loves it there. I talked to him.
They draw. They got a good environment.
But I will say, he is a huge ambassador for the league, and he is really good, like in terms of putting the product out there. But really good. I mean, I still think he does Jets preseason games, like pre and post. Maybe he did a lot of Buccaneer stuff. But we'll try to grab him
doing Buck stuff. Yeah,
we'll try to grab him, and he was doing a lot of ESPN college apps. He was doing a lot of the games on Saturday afternoons. He did a ton of games there, but all right, we'll try to grab him maybe next week if I'm filling in next week. I haven't looked at my schedule. I'm not that far ahead yet, John. I'm sorry.
I can't get past today, man. I got another long day.
I got a 4-hour radio show to host in a couple hours. I'm like preparing for on the fly here because I was up too late. You were up too late, but we have another hour for you. Chris Franklin's going to join us in about 19 minutes from now. So I hope everybody, man, there's a lot of people watching here today. What's up on this Friday? We've got a huge boost on, the draft. And we'll talk about that coming up next here on Birds 365.
They're carving them up and good play calling along the way. First and goal at the 6.
On the field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you
Champions on 3. 1, 2, 3.
because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Heading down the shore. Have a ball once more.
Here, imaginations run wild and time stands still. Because here, you can find the best of the Jersey Shore, all on one 5-mile island. So leave the old you behind and get lost in the woods.
Wild, wild, wildwood day.
Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Hi, I'm Jim Muehlbronner, Managing Partner at Delval Insurance Group. Give us a call. We're a local, knowledgeable agency, not an 800 number. Go Birds!
The greatest fans on earth. It's a bold statement, but would you expect anything less from Philadelphia? 58 years of heartache creates a toughness, a grit, a resolve not found in most. Sure, our prayers were answered, but now that we've had a taste, we're looking for more. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles.
EAGLES, Eagles.
A Friday edition of Birds 365. Hour 1 is in the books. You can go back and check that out on YouTube. But right now, live, Hour 2 with reaction to normally you say it's a crazy night. It wasn't crazy, but the ending was crazy. It was like a slow movie that you're like, well, I've come this far. I guess I have to keep going to see what the ending is, because I guess you anticipated all of these twists and turns to lead you like a Harlan Coben novel here, John McMullen.
Yeah, Jersey guy, Harlan Coben.
I'm a Harlan Coben Netflix. I watch a lot of the Harlan.
Oh
Coben
yeah, I watch every
Netflix
Harlan. Well, I can't say every because he does a bunch that are
some of them are
as well.
Yeah,
so he does some,
well, you got to go. All right, so you got to put the closed captioning on.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. Sometimes I do watch him. I watch the French one. I watch the Spanish one, but I don't know. I don't like if he does one in English. I watch every single one.
Yeah. Well, last night was not the Harlan Coben movie. It did not have for the Eagles. There was twists and turns everywhere else that led the Eagles to be able to unbelievably have a decision, and they have a decision between the two corners that many people thought, A, they could trade up to number 12 to go get, or B, up to number 16 to go get. The Jets end up making a deal. Seattle's on the board at 16. That's where, okay, are the Eagles on the phone at this time, John? Were you thinking that at all?
Yeah, I mean, well, the two spots I looked at most closely pre-draft were 12 and 16 for a couple reasons. One, those two teams were thinking about moving down. And Denver was interesting because you didn't know if they would feel comfortable taking Bo Nix that high, and they did, which I don't know if they were comfortable. I think they would have preferred to go down and get him at, say, 22 where the Eagles were. So that was the first spot, and then 16 with Seattle was the second spot. And yeah, so you started thinking, all right, what's going to happen here? And then even more defenders, Dallas Turner, who was most people projected him to be the first defensive player off the board to Atlanta. And Atlanta went with Michael Penix Jr. So that threw that off. Evidently, he's got some kind of medical issue that might have been a little bit of a problem for some teams. So he ended up going 17, and Minnesota went up to get him from, I think, 23. So then the defensive players started to go a little bit, but no corners.
Yeah, and the Seattle thing made some sense because they didn't have a second-round pick. So you had a second-round pick to offer them for them to be a willing, partner to say,
and a lot of people focused on Seattle as the team where the Eagles were going to go up with. I went even higher to Denver. But yeah, I mean, that was an obvious one.
So Denver takes Bo Nix, by the way, and trade it for Zach Wilson. So it's like you get Zach Wilson. He finally feels like he's like, all right, man. And then you put him right back into a mental gymnastics of why would you take a quarterback? You just traded for me. Does that kind of counteract the trade? Or should it not be assumed that he was there to get that job?
No, I mean, they said pretty quickly. I mean, that's, he's going to be given an opportunity, but by no means is that going to take quarterback out of the draft from the perspective of the Broncos. You can't count on Zach Wilson at this point, but, maybe lightning strikes and you have different bodies and you do go about it that way. You carpet bomb it and say, maybe the light comes off with Zach Wilson under better coaching staff. Sean Payton, whatever you think of him, is a very good coach, especially from an offensive perspective and a quarterback's perspective. Maybe it's Bo Nix. Maybe it's Jared Stidham. Who knows? But, carpet bomb it and maybe one hits. With Turner, I forget. Who was it, 17? Who'd they move up with? I forget. So obviously, boy, who was that trade? Why can't I think of it? Who had the 17th pick coming in, Mike?
I'm getting there for you. Sorry.
I'm tired.
Yeah, we're all tired. I got you on that one. I'm feeling you. I'm picking up what you're putting down on that one. Yeah. No, the 17th pick was Dallas Turner, was Minnesota.
No, but I mean, who'd they trade up with? Because they traded
Jacksonville.
Jacksonville. Thank you.
So Jacksonville was 17. Minnesota moved into that because Minnesota got the deal to move up to the quarterback, J.J. McCarthy, and then they traded again to get Turner.
Exactly. And that's an indication, obviously not an indication, a confirmation that Jacksonville was willing to go down. But I don't think a lot of people focused in on them. And then it was Cincinnati, the Rams, Pittsburgh, Miami, and then the Eagles. And by that point, the Eagles, as I said, Howie said, they felt very comfortable. They had a group of players that all had the same grade and they had a preference, but they would have been comfortable with any of them.
Was there any moment that you thought maybe, I know 50 and 53, I don't know if that would have, that they would have tried to get back into the first round late there? Because after they picked at 22, I'm thinking, all right, I'm ready to go to sleep. But I'm trying to hold on to see if they got back into the first round. Was there any thought in your mind? Did you say 22? They're done. They made their pick. When's Howie talking? Or is there something else coming here? Based on who was still left?
No, I didn't think there was any chance that they would try to get back in the first round. I've talked to Howie a lot over the years about the 5th-year option, and I think everyone assumes that that's a good thing to have the 5th-year option. Howie explained that sometimes it's a very good thing at certain positions, quarterback being most notable. It's actually a very bad thing at other positions. So you have to be very careful just assuming that's valuable. And I think when you look at the board and when you talk to a bunch of scouts and a bunch of people, there was about, the fall off was about 23,
Yeah.
which is where Mark Dominic put it, the former GM of Tampa Bay, and he got put the farthest. I use Mark for that reason. Everybody else was less than 23. So he was the guy that gave me the most deep, and then it falls off. And then from 24 to say 40, very similar. So why do you want to move up, when you might be able to get somebody in
All right,
that
let
range?
me throw a guy at you that's a possible trade up today who was talked a lot about at 22, and that would be Cooper DeJean. Because now
I ain't taking him now. I guess you can play him at safety.
I was going to say, because now he has the ability, you have the ability to bring him right in as a safety, and then you have insurance as a corner if you need him, in that role. But are you intrigued at all by if Vic Fangio likes this player to say, give me that guy and see what they do with him?
Yeah, I would be intrigued with him as a player. I think he's going to go very early tonight. You know how this thing works now in the new setup, Mike. Like everybody gets to sit back and I'm talking about the personnel people. They get to sit back and see what happened and see who's left. And you almost always see the moves up early because somebody loves a particular player that's still there so much they go up and get them. I think Cooper DeJean might be that guy today. So if you do want him, you're going to have to get up. Now, Buffalo starts at 33. I think they're going to.
That was a weird trade that they made last night.
Yeah, I think they're going to take a receiver from all the issues, and there's still some good receivers on the board.
Yeah.
Obviously, they moved on from Stephon Diggs.
Mitchell from Texas.
Yeah, he might be the first guy off the board. That's who I was thinking. He might be 33.
McConkey from Georgia.
McConkey's there too, but I think they need more of a big play threat. So I like
Keon Coleman.
Oh, I love Keon Coleman,
Yeah,
but he can't run. That's the knock on him. He doesn't have a good 40 time, but he's like a really big, physical receiver who's just good. He can just play. There's a lot of good receivers. Cooper's in the mix for guys who go early today, and then a bunch of offensive linemen. Patrick Paul. I'm looking at my list. Johnny Newton is still there, the defensive tackle from Illinois. Oh, Kool-Aid McKinstry. I mentioned Marshawn Nealon with Damo.
You got some interesting all names that if you were a mock draft fan, these are all names that you were seeing generally littered in mock drafts in first rounds. Newton,
yeah,
you mentioned Mitchell, McKinstry, DeJean. Rakestraw had been in and out of first round. I know you like Nealon. Andrew DeCecco is a big fan of Nealon as well. Marshawn Nealon. Eric Cooper, the linebacker, if you want to keep an eye there. Junior Colson, another one. How about Lassiter, too? Damo mentioned the Eagles getting into the corner game. TJ Tampa is a guy that I know DeCecco likes a lot.
Jackson Powers Johnson. I mentioned your guy, Zach Frazier from West Virginia.
Zach Frazier's interesting. I mean, he played center. He played
Yeah.
center. Obviously, he was very good center too. But would somebody want to, like, if the Eagles said, "Hey, we like this guy so much, but we think we can put him at right guard," and if Juergens bombs, we have a guy who can play center too. I don't know.
Can't hurt. And the same thing with the Oregon kid. He's got that versatility as well. Jackson Powers Johnson, Roman Wilson, a guy could be a fit for the Eagles as the third receiver. Kingsley, I'm going to screw up his name. Suamataya from BYU. A lot of people had him as a surprise first round pick late in the process. And he could be the heir apparent at tackle. A lot of good names still out there. And then I think it falls off at about 15 or
Mm.
so. Braden Fisk is another guy.
Well,
Christian
there's
Haynes.
there's no better name out there than Pork Roll, Egg, and Cheese, who's commenting that TJ Tampa will be the best corner in this class. But there is a lot of there's a lot of corner talent that is still there. Max Melton, who is from my neck of the woods, is another guy that could be there around 50. If
I
they
mean, the
wanna
Eagles
load up
just
on
took
corners.
the Eagles just took a corner. I
was
the
a little
Eagles,
surprised that Damo said that, though.
the Eagles just the Eagle. Does everyone forget Kaylee Ringo and Eli Ricks and Isaiah Rodgers? I know they don't forget Isaiah Rodgers because they thought they had Deion Sanders.
No, but you know how people get. It's like Andre Dillard's is in it. I know people think Dillard stinks, and then he got cut by Tennessee, so that didn't help. But he played right tackle one night and got absolutely undressed.
Yeah.
The rest of his career at left tackle, he was serviceable. I wouldn't say he was a Pro Bowl level player, but he wasn't horrendous. And
no,
he's
and
only
even his last year, people forget he played some left guard, and they had
people only remember him
back.
from the night that he played right tackle and got abused, and that forever was who he was. He was never anybody. I mean, Tennessee ends up signing him because they saw what he did as a left tackle and a versatile player. And I'm not trying to say Dillard was great, but people get it in their mind, that first impression, and that never goes away. So the first impression of the guys you just mentioned was they're not good enough. Ringo, not good enough. Ricks, not good enough. Joe, you all got a chance and you weren't good enough. So it's like if you're not good enough that first time you step on the field, there is no evolution. There is no getting better. And I think that's why you're saying people forget these guys. It's not that they forget them. They think they stink.
Boy, I think that's dead wrong about Ringo. I think he actually played pretty well when he was forced in. Now, I think the disappointment with him is it took him a while to get on the field, and they tried Ricks before him because he was a little bit raw. But once he got on the field, you saw some of the talent. And I'd said, maybe he's one of those guys who's not necessarily a great practice player, but then the red light comes on and he performs. I think he's got a lot of potential.
Well, are the Eagles saying that they don't look at him the way that they should then?
No, I think the Eagles are thrilled once they got him on the field and once they saw.
I mean, I guess they could also say, hey, Slay's 32 or 33 years old. We have Ringo to be.
That's why I think their plan is, in 2025, I think their plan is the starting cornerbacks on this team, outside corners, are Quinyon Mitchell and Kaylee Ringo. I think that's the plan in the best case scenario. We'll see if they can get there. But Ricks as well showed some really natural cover skills, playing out of position in the slot as a big long guy. Now I have concerns with him about run support and holding up. He's not a very physical player. I don't think he's as good a prospect as Ringo is, but he's still a good prospect.
Real quick, I know Chris is going to be joining us here in a couple of minutes. Let's quickly Washington gets a quarterback. Not a surprise. Jaden Daniels is there at number 2. What about the Giants when they get on the board at 6? They end up getting Malik Neighbors instead of a lot of speculation about quarterback there. Did they make the mistake not taking the quarterback?
McCarthy.
Yeah.
No, I don't think they made a mistake, but they were trying to get up to 3. So Drake May was the pivot point because the Giants and Minnesota were both trying to get New England to come up Drake May and trade the pick. And he's an interesting guy because I think he's a legitimate top 10 pick, but I don't know how he succeeds in this situation. Situation's a big thing. Like, if you tell me Drake May landed in Minnesota, I'd say that's pretty good because he's going to have that supporting cast. In New England, I'm like, poor Drake May. And the Giants probably would have been similar to that, more New England than Minnesota because they don't have much of a supporting cast at this stage either. but way better than Daniel Jones. So I would have made if the Giants could have done that, I think they would have done it. And then when you get down to 6, it's JJ McCarthy, and I think they made the right decision. I don't think he's that much better than Daniel Jones, and you need.
I would totally agree. I would totally agree there. I think the Giants were disciplined in not joining the circus that happened last night.
Yeah, and by the way, McCarthy landed in the best spot he could have. And that doesn't mean he's going to succeed, but I think, again, he has a better opportunity there than he would have had in New York. So I think the Giants made the right decision, and they get a really good player, legitimate blue chip player in Malik Neighbors, and finally get a big time receiver, hopefully from their perspective. So maybe that helps out Daniel Jones.
We will take a look at how it all went down and why the Eagles selected Quinyon Mitchell. They had a choice. Why did they make the choice they ended up making? We'll ask Chris Franklin, Eagles beat writer for NJ.com, as he joins us next right here on Birds 365.
They're carving them up, and good play calling along the way. First and goal at the 6.
On the field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Heading down the shore. Have a ball once more.
Here, imaginations run wild and time stands still. Because here, you can find the best of the Jersey Shore, all on one 5-mile island. So leave the old you behind and get lost in the woods.
Wild, wild, wildwood days.
Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Hi, I'm Jim Muehlbronner, Managing Partner at Delval Insurance Group. Give us a call. We're a local, knowledgeable agency, not an 800 number. Go Birds!
The greatest fans on earth. It's a bold statement, but would you expect anything less from Philadelphia? 58 years of heartache creates a toughness, a grit, a resolve not found in most. Sure, our prayers were answered, but now that we've had a taste, we're looking for more. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles.
EAGLES, Eagles.
Huh? Mike Gill not back. Let's see when Mike returns to the show, but we got Chris Franklin, so here he is. A little bit late. That happens. We got no sleep. Where are you in the sleep meter, Chris Franklin?
I
was taking a nap. Wow. I just took a quick nap.
You're a good man, but it was like 4:30. I finally went to sleep. It was around there where I probably.
All right, I think I beat you by 15 minutes. I think it was about 4:15.
Yeah. What was it like on the other side? I'm almost trying to catch up. I'm like, this is kicking my ass.
Boy, I missed the days of Saturday and Sunday. Saturday and Sunday afternoon. But
I
that
got a
was
text message at 11:38 from Brett. Like, I was like, wait, what? They're doing this now? Like,
Yeah.
you couldn't wait till tomorrow? Couldn't
No.
you do this in the morning? Like, I
No.
mean, holy mackerel. But I
And
did not
Howie
stay
was
up for
after
any of it.
that, by the way. Well, I
Yeah,
don't
no,
yeah.
I did not stay for up for that. I kudos to you two for doing the heavy lifting there. But well, I'm sorry that I missed the first 10 seconds of that return there. But I was outside of my porch, rocking in the rocking chair, enjoying the beautiful day down the shore here. But
It's freezing out. It's freezing.
hey,
You gotta wait till it warms up.
I have rocking chairs on my porch, and I'm going to utilize them.
All right.
Okay.
All right.
Good move. Good move. That's a power move. It's like, you know what? That's good. You gotta love that Jersey Shore.
Yeah, I'm rocking and yearning to know Chris Franklin's take on last night. You're at 22. I would imagine, Chris, there's no scenario in any of our minds, the people watching, us having this conversation, that at 22, they're going to have a choice between Terrion Arnold and Quinyon Mitchell. So when they have the choice between the two, in your mind, break down how they end up landing on Mitchell over Arnold.
Well, first off, I think they should send a gift basket to the Atlanta Falcons for going with a quarterback instead of going defense, which they need to, because I think that's the way that really started to set things up for them. Because I just knew they were going to take they're going to take Byron, they're going to take an edge rusher or a defensive tackle, what have you, just to something to fix that. So when it came down to those, I'm like, okay, you know what? And usually I thought that I had Mitchell being the better guy ahead of Terrion Arnold, even going through. But I thought they were never going to be there at 20. Never. It can't happen.
No.
14 picks later, like, all right, maybe it does. So I think when it came down to it, I think he had to go with the gut and the long term. Like, I think that Mitchell has the higher ceiling than Arnold when it comes to that. I think I look at the way that, granted, I know it's the MAC. You got MACtion and everything, those Tuesday, Wednesday games. But when you look at the way his build,
Thursday night games, yeah.
I mean, I'm joking here, but as many Monday night games the Eagles had last year, maybe he'll be ready to prepare for this one too. But I look at the way is able to dislodge the ball from wide receivers as well too. His athletic ability, his speed, the 4.33. I look at all those aspects, and I look at the Eagles' new defensive backs coach, and look at how he develops players. And I'm thinking, you know what? With a guy with a little bit higher ceiling, I think Arnold's going to think he's going to be a really good player. With a guy with just a little bit more of an upside in Mitchell, I'll bet on that and to see that he develops into a true number one cornerback for the future for his team.
Nick's as thick as thieves with the Toledo coaching staff. How much do you think that played into it from the perspective of, and I mentioned it, Paul Domowitz was on in hour one, and I said, you know how these MAC, when you're at a program like Toledo and you get a big time prospect, you want to pump them up because you want to recruit off that prospect and say, look what we did for Quinyon Mitchell. So you get all the other teams get all the glowing reviews, and he's a great prospect anyway. But Nick gets the real deal because his roommate is the head coach, one of his best friends at Toledo. Larry Karras's kid is the defensive coordinator at Toledo. I didn't put as much stock in that pre-draft as I should have, even though I picked Mitchell to be the pick. Now I think, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, he trusts those guys.
I was talking to Bob Brook over my B partner there, and I really sat there when it entered 22, and I'm mad. I was like, oh, you got to be kidding me. Like, it had that aha moment that clicked when that pick made. I think it does help a lot. No, wrong. I think I think the Eagles have a really good relationship when it comes to Alabama and Nick Saban. So over since they picked Devonta Smith, but having the guy that back and forth, like, I'd be surprised if he was going last year going, hey, I got this kid that's going to be really good next year. You should keep an eye on him. Hey, look, he can really do this. And then we hear Alabama talking about Nick Saban last night talking about he was trying to get him to transfer all that stuff, which, by the way, should be looked into a little bit more, but that's a whole other story. But
fair game now. Everybody moves. I think it's by the way, I think that's a check mark in his category, Chris, in the fact that he wanted to stick it out at Toledo because he had a lot of respect for Jason Candle, giving him a chance. And he stayed loyal to him. I think that's a positive. He could have went to Alabama and got NIL money and
Well,
finished
and
starter
listen, I
would be in
mean,
the
a lot of
SEC.
people are questioning, the talent that he faced in the MAC. I mean, a lot of speculation leading up to this was, hey, he went into some of the, college all-star games and said, hey, give me the best of the best here. Give me the Ohio State guys. Give me the who, and excelled in those moments as well. Small sample size, but, a lot of times we get so concerned about these MAC guys or the small school guys. I mean, you talk about a MAC guy, Khalil Mack, Buffalo. He came in and was a game wrecker. I mean, if you could play, you could play. So I think the Eagles looked at the talent. But, John, I think you're right. It definitely makes you feel, I guess, more confident that there's a hard process. You never know who's giving you the right information. You would hope that Sirianni's buddy's going to say, hey, man, this guy ain't cut out for the league. Don't do it. And I know what you're saying. But you wouldn't throw your friend over the boat like that, would you? You wouldn't tell him to take the guy if you thought he couldn't play.
You'd hope not. You better not. If not, so all of a
Well,
sudden,
then
when
you're
it comes,
not friends. Yeah. Then you're
Christmas
no
time comes
longer
around.
friends.
So,
But, so if you can get any little, like you said, John, if you can get any small advantage to get information from that level of a confidant, which wouldn't be a confidant at this point, but it would certainly make you feel more comfortable than, as you said, here's the coach just trying to pump up his player because he wants his school to get a higher profile. Someone would end up taking the kid at some point. It's not like he
Yeah,
wouldn't
and
be
by
a
the way, I'm not
transfer.
good. That's what every college coach does. They want their kids to be successful because they want to recruit off those kids. Now,
Sure.
it's a lot easier to do at Alabama when you got 50 of them every year, but for Toledo, it's like a big deal to get a first round pick. So
Absolutely.
you're going to spin that in the most positive fashion imaginable for every team in the NFL. And the 31 other teams were getting that vision when it came to Quinyon Mitchell. I think the Eagles were getting the completely unfiltered version, which is
right.
Probably all good, but that I'm saying they could trust it. And the other teams, maybe they're like, they know how it works. Or am I making too much of that, Chris?
no, I think it really does. And I think when you also look at the level of competition, I think it still can supersede that. I mean, I still remember back in the Boca Raton Bowl, I want to say it was like 2016, 2017, when I was covering Temple, see this guy just like tearing them up. And you're like, well, this guy's actually pretty good. I mean, Temple's defense was decent. Wound up being Kareem Hunt. So you never, and when they're playing Toledo. So you never know, like, it'll be times like guys that stand out, they're going to stand out. If you could have good talent, you have good talent. And he has a lot of that natural talent. And when you look at it, it's not just like, oh, well, he's dominant. It really, truly translates to this NFL level.
I was talking yesterday about, and people are like, oh, Mac. Freaking Dallas got to play at South Dakota State. I mean, there's players you find everywhere. Division II players. So many big time. There's people in the Hall of Fame. I covered John Randall, went to Texas A&I, Chris Franklin.
Wow.
You never scout the helmet. You scout the player. Now it becomes more difficult to make that transition when they don't have, Alabama guys are playing great competition. So it's a little bit easier, but to dismiss somebody because they're not in a Power 5 conference, every NFL roster is dotted with guys from small schools, at least a few, or smaller schools or non-Power 5 schools, however you want to look at it. I'm surprised people are like Toledo. Toledo's not bad. It's a decent You bring up Kareem Hunt. It's a good player. They've had good players come out of that program. I'm surprised.
Hey, you bring up the guy that, and Chris, I want to get your take on this, that Mitchell is likely going to replace James Bradbury. Went to Samford? I mean, and you would say, well, he was an all-pro player 2 years ago. So James Bradbury, another guy, not a very well-known college career. But what is James Bradbury's future now, Chris? Is he the starter at camp and Mitchell holds the proverbial clipboard and learns? Or are the Eagles going to say, thank you for your service, and we are going to be moving on from this arrangement?
I think heading into these next few phases of OTAs and mandatory minicamp, I think he is going to be a starter. I think it's going to be how he initially looks in that first week in that new system, and if it looks like he has that bounce back, how he's doing that. I think when everything's said and done, when we get to training camp in the NCAA, I truly think that James Bradbury is going to be a starter. I know a lot of people don't want to hear. It's like, oh, why is he still going to be team on a cutoff?
I'd love to see that, by the way. I
Yeah,
wouldn't mind seeing that. I'm one of the few who wouldn't mind. I've been saying for a while. I think James, if they give him the opportunity, he'll have a bounce back season with Vic Fangio. I think, and it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world to start Quinyon Mitchell out slowly. But boy, Chris, the NFL's changed. You almost have to get first round picks on the field. You see what happened with Nolan Smith. I mean, he was the 30th pick, and people are like, he's a bust. I mean,
yeah, it's,
there's so much pressure to get those guys on the field.
Yeah, I think you still can get him on the field. I'm not just talking about, oh, get him on kickoff coverage team and get him on this one. No, I think you can get him on legit, like, and say, like, dime packages. I at this point with this pick, I'd probably say move Isaiah Rodgers into the slot, have him in the competition with Devontae Maddox, have Mitchell, who I think is going to be, who already is probably their fourth, fifth best corner now on this roster. Have him play on the outside dime. Maybe move Bradbury outside and inside again, like he did sometimes in the slot.
Ooh,
Maybe
I don't want to see that.
Maybe do that, but they have a lot of options they can play with, and a lot of times in this defense now, and you hear it more and more around the league, it's become positionless in the terms of maybe you have somebody, especially with that zone, like for three, you got the same responsibilities as a safety would. Like if you go, especially with some parts, you're going back. So I think it's one of the things where you see a lot of that. I look at guys like, maybe, and it's sort of similar when you look at Denver Broncos back from a couple of years ago, where they start trading some of these guys away. Like you start trying to target. Maybe you get not so much for this draft that we're in right now, but maybe for next year, do you start trading away, seeing the deals for like 6th and 7th round picks because you're going to cut a guy, or did you see a player for player, or like a lower level roster player for player that you need to fill a need at that you can get as well too. So I look at those the bottom half or a guy you're going to get rid of and seeing that one too. But I think all in all, I think we're going to see that Bradbury's here to stay for next year.
That's interesting. So if Bradbury's here, you got a very crowded room. I mean, you've got a bunch of guys. We're forgetting Vontae Maddox. If he could stay healthy, I mean, that's a guy that the Eagles have been.
And don't forget Isaiah Rodgers.
He's been on the field. Isaiah Rodgers, those two guys, Slay, Bradbury. You just drafted a guy, and then there's the batch of stew of the other guys who all seemed to get reps last year. Joe, Eli Ricks, obviously Ringo. There's other guys, Mekhi Gardner. I mean, they signed. I keep forgetting the guy's name because I was on vacation when they
Tyler
signed
Hall.
Tyler Hall. They've got
13 quarterbacks right now.
They've got 10 guys. There's 10 guys in that room, and possibly more after today and Saturday. But
nobody talks about Zach McPherson. I mean, Zach is going to be a big part.
There's another guy who they actually drafted in what was that, the 4th round?
Fourth round. Yeah.
So that's a very crowded room, Chris. I mean, it looks like they're going to have a lot of competition at that spot.
Yeah, that's one reason I wanted to ask yesterday if they're thinking about converting somebody else to a safety potentially too, because like there's some talent that you have there. It's like it's actually gonna be one of the fun things to watch. Normally you'd say like, okay, you want to see wide receivers going at it. Like that's always the fun part when it comes to competition. When it comes to this one, when you look at the cornerback, that's gonna be fun. I can't wait to see these one-on-ones. I know they're joint practices, but I actually can't wait to see them coming up because you get to actually truly see, like, you're more focused now on the cornerbacks to see what these guys can do. It's going to be some tough decisions there. I mean, the Max, like, I know you released him earlier on, but maybe is he going to be more times a safety, which we know you've seen him play safety sometimes. You're going to move him back there to try to get more reps, even maximize what you have there too.
Back to safety.
Yeah. So it's so many different options you can do with this defense, and I mean, they say it's a good thing, like they have all these cornerbacks up. Good luck trying to find the right. Good luck trying to find the right combination, especially down to depth. There should be. They're a lot better now, I think, than what we saw at the end of the season with the way everything turned out to be with under Matt Patricia. Because that was it's a lot better.
That was not good. By the way, just
yesterday,
John,
yesterday when we had Colin Thompson on, who played in Chicago with Fangio, he didn't play defense, but he said the one takeaway is that there will only be one voice in that defensive room, not like What about this? What about this? How about that? What about that? No, one guy, and this will be the way it is, and then how much that might tighten up and clean up.
And
this
remember
defense.
Kevin Byard, that was a big thing when Kevin's like, yeah, we're trying to throw out our own ideas for that became that was overblown, but still, yeah, you're not going to do that with Vic Fangio. I'm pretty comfortable with that. Just buttoning up Toledo, by the way. They have a great website, by the way. Good job, Toledo. Jason Candle has coached 29 NFL players, 27 of them from Toledo. 27 NFL players from Toledo that he's coached. So, yeah, it's not a run-of-the-mill. It's not Alabama, but it's not the worst college in the world either. Day 2, Chris. I think a lot of us thought the Eagles would probably enter
the first Toledo Rocket taken in the first round since 1993.
Yeah, well, for a lot of NFL players, a lot of NFL players.
Some
That's
Toledo
Rocket knowledge. Who was it? Do you know who it was?
Yes, it was a gentleman by the name of Dan Williams.
Dan Williams. All right, that's good Rocket knowledge.
If spin doctors were around that time, like if you're going back to spin doctors, it might be a little oof, but still, it works from that
one. Day 2, Chris Franklin. I think a lot of us thought the Eagles wouldn't have 50 and 53. They probably used one of them to move up. They didn't have to. They have 50 and 53. You got some eyes. You got some names you're keeping an eye on for the Eagles. Or will they trade up? You know how this works. They did it last year on day 3 with Kaylee Ringo and said, hey, Ringo's still there. Let's go up and get him at the top of the 4th round. They had went up to the 2nd or 3rd pick in the 4th round. But they're going to do that. Howie looks at it and says, you know what? So-and-so's there. Maybe I'll package him and try to go up.
I think it's one of those things where I look at it more like an elastic band where you just basically at 50-53, you do go in 2 directions with both picks. I really, really like Edrin Cooper. I think he can be the type of guy that you can really have
A1 starter here, I think.
I had a AFC scout told me he's the most disruptive player at that position he thinks in his draft. And I look at the way he does this. I'd throw in, and I know you don't, it'd be a long time between the 2nd, 3rd, but that's what I'll tell you what the second part is. I'd trade up. I don't care if it's the 4th pick, the 4th rounder, or 2 of the 5th rounders, and package that with the 2nd, move up to take him. I think he's that good that you should be able to do that. With 53, I'm trading back, trying to recoup a couple of those picks, see if there's any takers there, maybe get that 4th or a 3rd back if there's somebody's really looking for somebody. In the Houston Christian Alex Hunt, I really like the way some of the characteristics he has. I really think that when you look at the fact that you only have Nolan Smith and Bryce Huff under contract beyond this year, when you're looking at guys that traits you want to have that quickness off the edge, is he still green? Yeah, he's very, very green, but this is why you really need to rely on Jeremiah Washburn to develop this guy and do this, because I think he really could be a really good pass rusher in this league.
I see. He was the kind of guy I was hoping that would drop to day 3, early day 3. You think he's going to go?
I think he's going to go, especially with I think everybody's I think this might be an overcorrection round with all those teams that went offense early. I think you see a run on like people trying to go defense now.
That's good.
And then we see all that when it comes to the edge rushers and everything else, corners and edge rushers are going to fly off, and Cooper, maybe Peyton Wilson, maybe in that, but the medical stuff on him is kind of.
There's so many. Even when you look today, we know how many good offensive linemen went in the 1st round. There's still so many left. It's unbelievable.
It really
and they have
is.
interior guys. You know, the Eagles don't want to take an interior guy in the 1st round for obvious reasons. But now you're in the 2nd round, and you got Beebe and Zach Frazier and Jackson Powers Johnson. I mean,
you know what? Let it roll down. I think it's just going down. I still think there's going to be guys when we look in the 5th round. You're like, offensive lineman wise, you're like, they're still there. Mm-hmm. I think there's a lot, like especially with the offensive line. If you're looking for a right guard, or if that's what you're really worried about coming into this as one of the needs left. I know you said everybody talking about the tackle. I know I was still too. I thought they were going to take tackle 1st round. That's the way I really did. But once all the good guys went, You had to do that.
By the way, that BYU tackle's still out there. I thought he might be a potential late first round pick. I don't want to butcher his name, but
Well, good luck you got that. I can't. I'm one of them.
There are so many good. Patrick Paul is out there. Roger Rosengarten, who the Eagles had in for a top 30 visit. Dallas Goddard's guy from South Dakota State, Mason McCormick, is a potential day 2 pick.
There were some prominent mock drafts that had Patrick Paul going to Philadelphia at 22 at one point.
Yeah,
early in this process. Yeah. So there's a ton of talent there, but there's also a ton of talent. Chris, like you mentioned at the top, like you would trade up to go get Edge Cooper. I like Colston actually. I think he would be awesome here. But a couple guys that might be lingering in that upper 30 area that the Eagles, they didn't trade yesterday, but could they get a little itchy trigger finger to do it today?
I think Howie was pacing back and forth. Like it's almost like he needed his fix. Like, you know what? I need to make a move. I need to go. Come on, somebody make a move. I think we see him. I think we see a move, maybe a couple moves in this one too, to satisfy his fix on that one too. So I think we'll see something. I think we really will see a trade coming down.
So outside of Cooper, are there guys that are like at the top of that draft board in the second round that you're like, I could see that guy getting them trading up for him or him? Of the top prospects that are out there.
Well, John mentioned Rosengarten, and that's what we really think, because I thought it was a one moment during the combine. When I was watching, I thought I was really thinking, because when Stout was running that one, the drill, I forget what it was, basically checking the lateral movement and out when the pass blocking. He just said, come on, man. But then when Rosengarten come out, all right, Roger, let's go. Like, wait, Stout call. I mean, maybe I'm looking way too much into it, but like Stout uses first, like, wait, he's calling right man, but Roger, come on, let's go. Maybe he really likes this guy. He looked at him a little bit more in chat. So that's the kind of thing. Like, I wonder if he's going.
And he's a natural right tackle, so he's the guy who would be, heir apparent.
How we need to get this on right now? Like, see, I can hear it in that accent, the Brooklyn accent. Like, how will you need to get this guy? I know what I'm talking about. This is the guy we need. I just hear him saying that in that war room. So maybe that's.
I like that Howie story about Jeff Stoutman though, where he said, Stout will like a guy and he'll say, you got to see this guy. And Howie go, yeah, he's going to be a top 10 pick, Stout. Yeah, we got it. We've seen him. That's how focused he is. He's not paying attention to anything else, but just how good the particular prospect is. But I mean, to me, you got to get Chip Stoutland something. And anytime you talk about the first 2 days of the draft, if the Eagles don't come out with an offensive lineman or a defensive front player, that's strange. That's a curveball. So Marshawn Nealon's another guy who's out there as an edge rusher. Offensive line, edge rusher. I could see both.
Why not go Javon Bullard's another guy too? He might probably go early, but I like him, the safety out of Georgia. I really like his game too, and
that's where I'll end it with the knuckleball at C Franklin News. Make sure you follow Chris. I hope you get a nap before I see you later. But
I will.
There's a lot of work, work to do. NJ.com. Read them there. Wide receiver. They just paid $84 million guaranteed to AJ Brown. They just paid Devontae Smith, but they still need a third receiver. You want an upgrade over Paris Campbell. Is that a curveball in the mix?
I think that would be a big curveball on today. I think they really, if they got a wide receiver, hell, even a tight end, I think they got either one of those two positions, and we hear that name, and we're like, what the heck is going on? Like, you guys just really want to just truly outscore by and say defense. All right, cool. Let's make a stop or two sometime, and then you go that one. I'm looking more towards day 3, maybe with one of those 5th round picks. I mean, Luke McCaffrey. I mean, not only just for the bloodlines itself, but for his ability to read the coverage as a former quarterback in there. I think there's
they never get the good brother. They never get the good.
That's just Philly in general.
Nothing against Luke. But
there's been a lot of going off the reservation for the Eagles. They signed a running back. They gave 2 receivers big-time contracts. They drafted a corner in the first round. So the curveball has to be coming. There has to be. They're going to draft a linebacker. Survey says linebacker. That's one of the 2 picks here because everything has been so unconventional so far this offseason. But I want to get your quick thoughts, Chris, on the A.J. Brown deal. It dropped right before the draft started. You know, A.J.'s always an interesting cat. The social media stuff, people love to speculate that. They signed Smith, so then the speculation continued. But they get that deal locked up. What'd you think of the timing and the deal A.J. Brown gets? He'll be here for a long time with Devontae.
Truth be told, I thought when the signing came down, I was like, oh, what's coming down? What's going to happen? Why is this a distraction coming on? Is they going to draft something else, somebody else? What that's going to be? It's like, why is it going? But overall, it's well deserved for him. I look at the way that his impact that he has on his overall offense. When you look at the gravity he brings on the field and the attention that he draws to open things up for Smith. And I never bought into the whole thing of, well, they're signing Smith, so Brown's going to leave. Like, and the one thing getting to see AJ a lot over these last 2 years is like basically whatever he says is on his mind. So when he said initially he wanted to stay here, I took it as a thing, and the whole Tom Brady picture thing and everything else, like, oh look, he's going to go, he's going to trade, and they're going to get 3rd round. Like, wait, what? That's the thing. But I think overall, when you look at his production, it's well worth it. You have now Devontae Smith and AJ Brown for the foreseeable future.
Pure football player on the Philadelphia Eagles, AJ Brown. Been saying it for and you see, by the way, when he's not, if you think about the Eagles in 2021 versus the Eagles in 2022, what is the difference? They were a good team, and then they get AJ Brown, everything falls into place. Then you go to the playoffs last year, ironically in the same place, he can't play, and you look like garbage. I don't think that's a coincidence. He is very impactful to this team offensively. Everybody else falls into place. Devontae's a great player, but he's a really great 1A or 2. Not a superstar top 5 AJ type number 1 receiver.
Similar to what they have in Cincinnati, where you got Chase, who's just off the board, and the other 2 guys are really, really good, but it makes the whole thing flow. The odd part is, and we don't have enough time, is why the hell didn't it flow last year when you had those 2 guys? Hopefully things change offensively with those 2 guys.
He had 1,400 yards receiving again.
And you look at the time, like the same time that Devontae Smith entered the league, it's he and Brown are together, like in a lot of top 10 in the categories, reception yards and stuff like that. I think the Eagles finally have their version of the greatest show on turf in terms of having Isaac Bruce and Torrey Holt together. I think you have these guys locked in for a while now. They can put up some really good numbers. So that when we're looking back in this era, I think we're a few years from now, if everything holds up, if they have the right play caller that sticks around or what have you, and Jalen Hurts continues to be that guy, you think you have a potentially historic type duo that we're going to see here. And I think it's
we never talk about Jalen Hurts anymore because he's a constant, but he's under a lot of pressure because
let's see if they add anything to Hurts' side of the ball, or will they continue to focus on Vic Fangio's defense? Round 1 brought Quinyon Mitchell, a corner. We'll see what round 2 brings with pick 50 and 53. Tonight, Chris Franklin, NJ.com, covers the Eagles, and he covered it all right here on Birds 365. Thanks, Chris.
All right, thanks, guys. Y'all have a good one now.
Thanks, bud.
Good stuff. And check out his coverage of last night's pick. You can follow him over there at Chris Franklin, C Franklin News. And we'll be back to wrap it all up here. What's going to happen at 50 and 53? It all starts tonight. John and I will talk about that coming up next on Birds 365.
field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on three. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Heading down the shore. Have a ball once more.
Here, imaginations run wild and time stands still. Because here, you can find the best of the Jersey Shore, all on one 5-mile island. So leave the old you behind and get lost in the woods.
Wild, wild, wildwood days.
Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Hi, I'm Jim Muehlbronner, Managing Partner at Delval Insurance Group. Give us a call. We're a local, knowledgeable agency, not an 800 number. Go Birds!
The greatest fans on earth. It's a bold statement, but would you expect anything less from Philadelphia? 58 years of heartache creates a toughness, a grit, a resolve not found in most. Sure, our prayers were answered, but now that we've had a taste, we're looking for more. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles.
EAGLES, Eagles.
All right, getting ready to wrap up this Friday edition of Birds 365. John McMullen, I'm Mike Gill. What's up, everybody? Enjoyed the draft tonight. Pick 50 and 53. That's where they are slotted to draft. No speculation on whether they'll move or not. We thought for sure they were moving. They did not last night. Quinyon Mitchell was the pick. It seems that it is somewhat liked. I mean, I guess there's a camp that's going to say they should have taken Arnold, and the other side, I mean, that's the society we live in. You got half the people on the Arnold side, the other half like Mitchell. But it seemed that those were the consensus two choices. It didn't seem like anybody was like, well, why didn't you take somebody else? It seemingly was down to those two players, and most people are either an Arnold or a Mitchell guy.
Yeah. And once Pittsburgh made their decision, I think it became pretty clear was going to be about the corners, and the Eagles got the player they wanted.
Joe Alt, by the way, went 5. J.C. Latham ends up going 2 picks later.
Yeah, Latham was interesting because he was a player the Eagles had a lot of interest in as a potential trade-up guy as well.
Yeah.
But it became very clear late in the process that he was going to go a lot higher than most people assumed, and the Eagles knew that. I was talking to somebody down there last night, and they said, veer off J.C. Latham, because I had kept talking about him as a potential trade-up, and he's not going to be there. Yeah. And a lot of people thought he was going 5 to the Chargers because Harbaugh had a lot of interest in him. He went the safe route without Alt, who's one of the better prospects in the draft. And then Tennessee, which wanted Alt, just switched to Latham. So, yeah, he was a lot more desired than I think most people understood in NFL circles. But the Eagles liked him a lot.
Yep, and the 8th pick, obviously, Kirk Cousins is perplexed.
That was the craziest pick. Atlanta was the craziest pick.
Yeah.
I want to shout out to Tony Khan. I forgot to say, my buddy Tony Khan, who did a wrestling angle on Wednesday night and showed up with a neck brace. Way to sell it, Tony. Yeah. Way to sell it, buddy.
All right, day 1 of the draft is in the books. Day 2 tonight, day 3, all day Saturday, and we'll look back at it. Monday, John will definitively be here. I may be here. I may not be here. You'll have to tune back in to find out who is sitting in this window.
We're all day to day. I'm day to day as well, Mike.
Well,
you never know.
John is definitively slated to be here.
That's true. That's the difference. Yes.
I have to look at my schedule for next week. But I enjoyed this week with everybody out there. Appreciate all the support, and hopefully you enjoyed the week with John and I here on Birds 365. Have a great draft weekend, everybody.
You've been listening to Birds 365, the destination for the passionate Eagles football fan who bleeds green. If it's Eagles football, we're talking about it. Debate inside the locker room and guests that are some of the greatest football minds from around the region. We hope you enjoyed the show. We know we had a blast. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with us on social media at JAKIB Sports. See you next time on Birds 365.